Update: my parents gave my sister our childhood home, then expected me to move in and pay rent to her. I refused, and now they're furious. Part 2. I was out of the picture completely. Seeing the documents made it all feel even more real. They hadn't even told me. They hadn't respected me enough to share what they'd done. It was like I didn't matter, like I was just a footnote in the family. My frustration turned into anger, and I knew I couldn't just let it slide. When I confronted my parents with the deed transfer, they brushed it off like it was no big deal. "You're being dramatic," my dad said, rolling his eyes. "It's just a house." "Just a house?" I repeated, struggling to stay calm. "It's not about the house. It's about you going behind my back, making this decision without me. You didn't think I deserved to know?" My mom sighed, looking exhausted. "We did what was best for the family. You have no reason to be angry about this." That's when I knew they didn't see it. They didn't understand the hurt they'd caused. They genuinely believed they'd done the right thing, that their betrayal didn't matter. I left that day feeling numb, like I'd lost something I could never get back. A few weeks later, my friend called with an update. He'd looked deeper into the records and found out my parents hadn't followed the legal steps necessary for the transfer. Essentially, the deed transfer was incomplete, and the house was still technically under their names. If I wanted, I could challenge it in court. At first, I wasn't sure. Taking legal action against my own family felt extreme, but the more I thought about it, the more I realized I couldn't just let them erase me like that. I wasn't trying to hurt anyone, I just wanted the respect they hadn't given me. After discussing it with my wife, I decided to move forward with a legal challenge. It wasn't about the money or the house itself, it was about standing up for myself, for what was fair, even if it meant upsetting the family. When my parents received the legal notice, they were furious. My mom called, accusing me of betraying the family and tearing everything apart. My sister was outraged too, claiming I was taking away her home. But I held my ground. "You left me no choice," I told them. "I didn't ask for this fight, but I'm not going to stand by and let you just cut me out without a second thought. I deserve some say in this, and if you're not going to listen, then the court will." The legal proceedings dragged on, and it got ugly. My parents tried to guilt-trip me every step of the way, calling me selfish and ungrateful. My sister went around telling anyone who'd listen that I was ruining her life and stealing from the family. She even started posting vague statuses on social media about toxic family members and the people who betray you. The whole thing felt surreal. Here I was, fighting for what was supposed to be my inheritance while my family acted like I was some kind of villain. Friends and distant relatives reached out, asking what was going on, and I had to explain over and over that I wasn't trying to take anything from my sister, I just wanted what was rightfully mine. As the court date approached, my parents tried to make peace, but it was clear they weren't sorry, they just wanted to avoid the hassle of going to court. My dad even suggested that I drop the case and that we'd figure something out as a family. But I knew that figure something out meant finding a way to screw me over again, just with a different approach. "No, Dad," I said firmly. "We tried to handle this as a family, and you went behind my back. This is the only way I know I'll be treated fairly." The trial itself was quick but tense. My parents sat there, looking defeated, while my sister shot daggers at me from across the room. The judge looked over the documents and declared the deed transfer invalid, which meant that legally, my sister had no claim to the house. Instead, my parents were ordered to either rewrite the will to include both of us equally or sell the house and split the proceeds. Hearing the judge's ruling was a mix of relief and sadness. I'd won, but the damage to my family felt irreversible. As we left the courtroom, my mom barely looked at me, and my sister stormed off without a word. It was like I'd lost my family for good, all over something that shouldn't have been a fight in the first place. In the weeks following the trial, my parents were cold and distant. My mom sent a half-hearted message saying she was disappointed in how things turned out, as if it was my fault the whole mess had happened. My sister was even worse. She completely cut me off, refusing to speak to me or even acknowledge my existence. Eventually, my parents decided to sell the house. They were too embarrassed to stay, now that everyone knew about the court case. They found a buyer, and after the sale, they sent me my portion of the proceeds without a single word. It was like a final, silent rejection, a reminder that in their eyes, I had betrayed them by standing up for myself. Looking back, I still feel a mix of anger and regret. I wish it hadn't come to this, that my family could have understood why I had to fight for what was right. But at the same time, I know I did the right thing. Allowing them to dismiss me, to let them decide I didn't matter, would have only made things worse in the long run. I don't talk to my parents much anymore. Our relationship is strained, and every conversation feels forced, filled with awkward pauses and unspoken resentment. My sister, on the other hand, has completely shut me out. From what I hear, she still blames me for ruining her life. But I've made peace with it. At the end of the day, I did what I had to do to protect myself. Sometimes family loyalty means standing up to the people who think they can walk all over you. It's a painful lesson, but it's one I'll never forget. So yeah, if you're ever in a situation where you feel like your family isn't treating you fairly, don't just let it slide. Stand up for yourself. They may never understand why, but at least you'll know you did the right thing.